Cobb TV. Watch your life make sense.
Hello again and welcome to Kabbalah Revealed. I'm Tony Kozenek. Last time we spoke about the force of development, the progression of desires, the way in which reality moves us along a path of development. We spoke about the quality that is the definition of the upper worlds, the spiritual worlds. The quality that is the definition of the physical world, and what it is about the way that we perceive that makes the spiritual worlds the greater reality hidden from us. We looked at the progression of desires. We saw that there were 4 categories of desires that are considered physical, and that because of the thought of creation, which is to create a creature and to bring that creature to unbounded delight, it must progress by means of what the creature finds delightful. And so all expression of development from the thought of creation is expressed through a lack and a filling. And we saw that desires progressed from simple desires, animal desires, for sex, for shelter, food, family. And when that was filled, we moved on to a greater desire, which is a desire for wealth, which is an accumulation of the first one. And when that feels empty to us because we are still feeling something driving us, something that's pushing us ahead, something that's pulling us forward, we feel that thing as a kind of a taste, as something that we must have, and we move towards it. And once we have it, we can't taste it anymore. But this is the force of development moving us on. And from wealth, we move on to fame, power. Once we fill that, we're moved on by our emptiness into knowledge. And then once we find knowledge empty, we find ourselves in a confusing situation in which nothing from this world can satisfy us. And if you recall, it's at that point at which a completely new level of development becomes accessible to us. So, when that special desire enters the heart from the spiritual, which is qualities of the will to bestow, it changes everything within the human heart. And the human heart, when you hear the term heart in Kabbalah, it means the sum total of all desires that a person has. This heart is still filled with desires that come from the physical world. These are still the things from categories 1, 2, 3, and 4. This desire which is a desire to reach the spiritual, is called Israel, from two Hebrew words, yashar, meaning straight, and el, meaning God, a desire for a direct connection with God. These corporal desires are called nations, the nations of the world. In other words, the desires of the physical world. Up until this point, the force of development, the way in which desire moved us until we came to a point where we actually needed to feel what was above the physical world, happened in an unconscious way. But from now on, it has to happen in a conscious way, because this point in the heart is a spiritual gene. It's like the embryo of the soul, and the soul is a kind of a desire. And it must be filled, the heart must be filled with this desire. It must fill everything despite these other corporal desires. In other words, all of the desires that we have to undergo a transformation, a correction. And it's by correcting these desires that the desire to go directly to God can be fulfilled. Now, why is that? In our original state, at the root of our soul, we were connected to the Creator as the Creator and the creature. In fact, these are the only two things that exist in creation, the Creator and the creature. And here we were adhered to the Creator as one being, as one unified creature. But because of the thought of creation, which is to create a creature and fill it with delight, that was only the starting point. It was the beginning of a system. And this quality of the creature, which is the will to receive, started to expand purposely. And as a result of the expansion of this quality, of this desire to receive for myself alone, a greater diversity in quality started to grow between the quality of the Creator, which is bestowal, and the quality of the creature, which is reception. And as this egoistic intention expanded, the first creature, the whole creature, the collective soul called Adam Harishon, meaning the first man, descended through a system of worlds, through 125 steps, to greater and greater egoism until the soul reached a point in which it became separated into what appears to be physicality. That is, the collective soul was shattered into 600,000 parts, each one of these parts having a piece of the original, each one of these parts a desire. Now, because this is a process, and this is only the halfway point, this broken, shattered aspect of the collective soul in which we experience isolation, separation from each other, a kind of antagonism towards each other, a desire to exploit each other, and an experience of the physical world, this is the halfway point, and it is going to be corrected. It's going to rise back up through this system of worlds, back into this state of adhesion with the Creator, but it can't do it all at once. So purposely, it was broken into 600,000 parts. Each one of these parts was likewise broken down into 613 desires. That is, each individual desire within Adam Harishon consists of 613 desires that can be corrected. The parts are small enough. It's like dividing a huge treasure and giving a coin to each person, knowing that each one will return this quality of bestowal, this point in the heart that's placed inside of it, can be trusted to bring that point back to its origin and put the treasure back together as a collective once again. So in the point in the heart of the individual who begins to feel this desire for spirituality, this coin from the treasury of the king, plus the 612 other desires that exist in the heart must be transformed bit by bit to resemble to a greater degree the quality of the Creator, to reverse this process. Now the thing is, this process of the return, of the correction, of the tikkun, of the transformation, of the fulfillment of the thought of creation, it's going to happen. And all of us, all 600,000 pieces of the collective soul are going to rejoin and are going to ascend from physical, selfish perceptions and a world of suffering back into a complete whole interrelationship with each other in such a way that we reach the goal of creation, which is adhesion to the Creator and the complete filling and of the greatest unbounded desire. It's going to happen. But the question is, will it happen consciously with our agreement, or will we be pushed to it? You see, there's one goal, and the goal is assured, but there are two paths to the goal. One path is called the path of pain, and the other path is called the path of Torah and mitzvot. Now, the path of pain is the path that we're all already on. It's not even really a path. It's what we see as the slow, grinding evolution of humanity that we call history. It is a kind of clinging to our physical way of perceiving, to the characteristic that we really need to transform. And as a result of this non-conscious involvement with the process of development, we find ourselves being pushed by events. We see catastrophes, we see tsunamis, we see wars, we have personal experiences in our lives, experiences of pain, experiences of suffering that are caused only by the lack of conscious involvement with the process of the development of desires and their correction. Now this path can go on and on and on, and it's disastrous. Once the point in the heart appears in a person, though, it becomes a conscious involvement. And this is the path of Torah and mitzvot. Torah means instruction by the light. And mitzvot means a transformation of a quality of one of the 613 desires from its egoistic expression to its altruistic expression. Every event that happens in our lives is really a mitzvah, a possibility for transformation being presented to us. Now, when I say the word mitzvah, I don't mean like the physical commandments where you are instructed to do a certain thing and there's a list of all these things in the Shulchan Aruch and the table of the Jewish law and so on. Do this physical thing. Now, I'm not saying don't do the physical thing. But what I mean is that this is an inner correction. It's a correction of desire. So whether you do the external good deed, whether it's a religious good deed or whether it's something that we consider to be something nice for somebody else, you can do any external deed and you can be filled with hatred and selfishness. You can't measure anything by that. Talking about one of these 613 desires that's presented to us as an event in our life. Our entire lives are planned in such a way by this process of development to present us with the opportunity to take what we first feel as a desire to receive for myself in a given situation and transform that into its altruistic form, to try to understand what the thought of the Creator is, the thought behind giving me that situation. Because, as you remember, the only way that we progress along a spiritual space is by altering a quality within me to resemble that quality in spirituality that I want to enter. So what it is that I want to know, according to this new desire, this desire straight for the Creator, is I want to know the Creator. I want to have a direct sensation. I want to feel in my desires, in the tangible things that occur in my life, what is the thought of the one, of the upper one, of that upper level that gave me this perfectly structured situation, that gave me this opportunity, like a birthday present, for me to take it first in its corrupted form, and by analyzing this and seeing what it is, feeling what his thought is behind it. That's a mitzvah. That's tikkun. That's transformation. These 125 states by which we descended from our connection to the complete reality down into our separated status as individual people and desires, these 125 steps are also completely encompassed by these 613 mitzvot. So that the correction of these transformations will bring the individual all the way back up the ladder. Another feature of this is that each and every level of descent is imprinted in us as a gene. Every point by which a greater and greater degree of the will to receive was added is remembered by us like breadcrumbs on a path. And this being the first spiritual gene, this point in the heart, our access to ascent, is actually the entry point on a chain of spiritual genetics called reshimot, remembrances. And all of the events that happen in our lives that bridge us between these 613 transformations of the will to receive to the will to bestow that bond us to the Creator, each event is laid out for us in a perfect pattern so that we have the opportunity to recognize what it is that we need to do. Now, this action of correction and transformation, this tikkun, is not done by us. It's done as a result of a desire that we have to make this contact with spiritual light. And as a result of the desire that we have, the work is done by the light. It's an action done on us by surrounding light. The Zohar says, when a person comes to purify themselves, they're help from above. In other words, it's as a result of a gut-level need that used to be a need for those four corporal desires, being transformed into a greater and greater need to know what the quality of bestowal actually is. We can't reach this ourselves. This work is called the work of God, not because we go out there like a bunch of nice soldiers and do the job that God assigned us. It's because the work itself of transformation, purification, tikkun, is done on us by the light as a result of an expanding desire. But don't be confused by the word light. Don't think of it as a physical thing. Remember that the quality of the spiritual world is a quality of attributes. It's a quality of intention, feeling states. And if you want to feel the contrast between your intention and the intention of the light, then you can't simply have a desire and have it filled directly by some kind of pleasure, the way that we do that in the physical world. In order to feel the difference between our state and the state of the light, my intention and the intention of the light, it's necessary to have a sensor, something that can feel the light. And this sensor must be an intention. It's called a screen. This is what we referred to in our last show as the additional sense, the sixth sense. Now, this screen acts as a resonator, a contrast point between the desire that sends this which is given by the light. And rather than having it just go directly in, it hits this screen and it causes a sensation of difference between the intention here and the intention here. And this screen, or masach, this is the tool. This is the way in which we can turn the will to receive, which is our matter, and the only tool that we have to work with, into something very different. We can begin to feel and receive the light only according to an intention that matches the intention of the spiritual world. Now, we'll deal with this more later. But what happens when this can actually occur, when the feeling in here and the intention in the screen is the same as the intention in the light? This is called a corrected desire. And this contrast creates a need in us, the right need, a particular need. It builds a lack in a particular direction. It makes us want to feel what we don't have, and that is the sensation of the light, the thought, the intention behind the light. And it moves us in the intended direction of greater and greater correction. Every time that a desire moves in transformation from its corrupted form into its perfected form, a transformation from its will to receive to the will to bestow, this puts us in touch with eternity. It connects us more and more to the thought behind the entire process. And not only does it do that for this one particular desire and for one individual, but as a result of the connection and the interconnection in Adam HaRishon, that part of person number one, that desire within person number one, like a hologram, becomes corrected in each one of the other desires and reconnects them to each other. So it raises not only the person who does the correction, but their entire world, so that our perception of our reality, the reason that things happen, the thought behind it, whether or not good and bad things are occurring, this changes. A person can feel the total goodness behind the guidance of the entire system and is no longer fooled by physical ideas of what's good and evil. This perception of the love behind the process is really what enlightenment is. Now we see good and bad events surrounding us, things that we want to happen and things that we feel should not happen. And this sense that we do something right or we do something wrong, that we make a certain act and we're punished for it, that there is a good force and a bad force in reality, this is not reality. This is the way that it appears to the will to receive. And enlightenment means that we can see, despite anything that appears to us, what the real unifying thought is behind that. Join us next time when we look at the force of development, the reason for suffering, and how we can rise above that. Hello again, and welcome to Kabbalah Revealed. I'm Tony Kozenek. Previously, we learned about the blueprint for reality, the thought of creation, the action of the Creator, the quality of the upper world, what spirituality is. This thought of creation, which is to create a creature and to fill this creature with unbounded delight, is the only reason that anything ever occurs. And everything that appears in our life is as a result of this. It's either it comes from it and it's on its way to the fulfillment of it, whether we can perceive that quality or not. And this is the problem that we have. Because we think in the deepest question that we have about our life and our inability to feel where we are and where we're going comes from the fact that we must ask, if the Creator is completely good and only does good, then why is it that we see evil? Why are there bad events? In order to investigate this question, the Kabbalists set for us a boundary on how we should investigate in order to get a real answer and not get confused. Baal Salam tells us that there's a rule in Kabbalah, and that is what cannot be attained cannot be named. What does that mean? The goal that we want to reach is a direct sensation of the Creator, not an idea, not some kind of an intellectualization, because there's no real answer in an intellectualization. You can't feel confident about an idea. You must be able to feel it within you in the same way that you feel where your feet stand or as you look at something that's before you. It must be tangible. Only there is a real change in perception, not in ideas or abstractions. Man cannot really understand the events in his life because man rejects half of all reality. Half of everything that occurs that is considered by him to be bad, man rejects. And that's because of an inner programming that we have, which is the will to receive. That will to receive functions as a guidance system. That is, we're completely controlled by it. And all that it's doing is it's either attracting us to something that we find delightful, that we find pleasure, and that we consider to be good, or we are running away from something that does not give us pleasure, that gives us emptiness. So we flee from that. We are constantly looking only for those things that are considered to be good. So our perception of what the purpose of both of these events is faulty, because our attention is never on the whole of the picture. It's always only on a small part of the picture, because we're looking at it from within the level of the problem itself. And this is a huge problem for us, because all perception, as we can see just in simple nature, comes only as a result of contrast. We only know cold by its opposite, heat. We only know up when we relate it to down. If we look just at the quality of heat in itself, if there was nothing opposite it, if it had no opposite quality, it would be, in essence, we wouldn't be able to feel anything in it. If there was no movement, no way to measure anything, what could we know about heat? There would be nothing there. There would simply be no sensation. So this comparison between what we consider to be good and why we consider it to be good, and what we experience as bad and why we consider it to be bad, this is the thing that needs to be measured. We need to have something that is not a sliding scale. And it may not seem so to us because we're blinded by this inability to incorporate the greater scope of reality. But all of our evaluation of good and evil from within the will to receive is completely subjective. It's a totally sliding scale. That is, we can say that certain events that we see are considered to be evil, but if you really look at it profoundly, if you look at what your true responses are, and here this is what is meant by only what can be attained can be named, you have to look at the actual experience. Take, for example, the tsunami disaster. There were 400,000 people killed in that disaster. And everybody, if you poll them, will say, this is horrible. The loss of life was terrible. The suffering of others was terrible. It's almost unimaginable, the scope of this, biblical scope of destruction, evil. But what happens if you happen to be one of the owners of the companies that gets to rebuild the resorts in those areas? It's the best thing that has happened to you in 5 years. So, what did you really experience? Can you say according to your idea that, I should feel this way about it, and therefore the idea of what's good is this, and the idea of what's bad is this? No, you must go by what you actually feel. If you measure something else, you're measuring something imaginary. Now, sometimes we can see this fact that something that we would first take as a bad experience, we can understand as a good experience when we look at the levels of life below us. If we look at something like a forest fire, and we see a tremendous amount of damage done, we can look at that situation and we can say, well, it was bad for the trees, but in the larger scope of things, what's going to happen is there was a purpose to this. There's going to be a thicker growth. We're going to have, maybe there'll be a more diverse forest, a thicker forest, and the things that were preventing its successful growth are now changed. And the only reason that we can see a disaster as a good thing is because we look at it as a process. We see the larger arc of development on the levels of life below us. Below us, there are levels of still or inanimate. There's the vegetative level, there is the animal level, and there is the human level that we live on. Unfortunately, this level is just a complex animal. And in order to be able to see what is happening to us and the programming and the instinctive level and the larger scope of what's happening to us in our lives, not to see just a single cross-section where we don't understand the plan or the vector, the way in which things are progressing towards the goal. When we look at this on the human level, we can't understand. We can't pull ourselves up by our own hair to some higher level. We have to be able to view it on a higher level, which the Kabbalists call the speaking level. Speaking level of man is where he begins to be part of the upper system and view the whole system of guidance provided by the Creator. That one force that moves us through two prongs of through the will to receive, that moves us, attracts us towards something good and repels us from something bad. If we can see it from this level above, we stop seeing the events in our lives as isolated chunks and try to name them at a place in time and space where we really have no perception of the reason for anything. So what do we do to be able to get ourselves into this higher state? How do we see from this higher point of view? Well, we can't do it ourselves. We can only do it with the aid of what is already there. We have to be able to sense what's there, and then we can become like it. Now, remember that the force of evolution is just the development of desires. And this system of upper light has arranged that we would be moved along through these desires until we came to desire precisely the right thing. But because we are involved in our development in an unconscious way, that is, not by our will are we brought into this, and not by our will do we proceed in this, until we come to the point where the awakening occurs in a person. The awakening is arranged by these events that we call good and bad. In other words, our desires continue to be developed and change so that our question becomes greater. And each of these, what we consider to be blows, make us ask the question on a deeper and deeper level. What is the real cause of suffering? Why am I suffering? And how can I stop suffering? And this force of development moves us along unconsciously until we will not settle for anything else but the answer to this question, because the answer to the question can only come from the higher level that guides the system that makes us feel as if there are good and bad events. So now that this conscious, tangible need has happened inside the sensation of the person that no other desire can replace, only the answer to this question, this conscious, tangible need, now the answer has a place to go. A person can receive it. But in order to know why we're suffering, we have to know what's good and what's bad. And we know that we can't feel that or measure it against a sliding scale. It can't be from within the will to receive. It has to be against something that doesn't change. And this, we know, is the quality of the Creator, which always and only gives its unconditional bestowal. And the quality of the creature is to receive, the will to receive for the self alone. It's the measurement of the contrast between these two qualities that begin to give us a sense of where we are. Because the only thing there is to feel and to sense is the Creator. The question is, how do I sense it? What do I sense it as? We live in a sea of light. That means we are always receiving delight into our vessel, our kli. This is our will to receive. And the upper light is constantly filling us with delight, that is, with a sensation which is actually a sensation of the light itself. It is always the Creator, except that it depends on what we say it is. It depends on what the dressing is, what we call this thing that's happening. All events of our life are sent to us in a way that we sense them directly as direct light. But if we feel them that way, that means that we feel them through the will to receive, and we don't know why they're being given. What we seek to do is to feel the thought inside of it. That is, what is this quality here? What is the quality of bestowal that is the Creator's intention behind giving to us in this event? How is this connected to the force of development that is bringing us to fulfillment? If we can understand and get a sensation of this, then we understand the event and we also rise to that level. And all that we seek to do in the events of life is to justify the Creator. This is what a righteous man is, what a tzaddik is. It's one who, regardless of the events of life, feels the thought behind the giving of the event, the benevolent force of the Creator's guidance. And only the difference between what we feel in our kli and what the Creator's thought is, that is, what our thought is, compared to what the Creator's thought is, this is the source of suffering. This contrast between my nature, my intention on reception of the light, and the Creator's intention on the bestowing of the light, this discrepancy causes me discomfort, suffering, and so on. This quality of bestowal, the quality of giving of the upper light, is the general law of the universe, and everything in the universe follows from that. All laws, inner and outer laws of nature, all follow from that. And it's incumbent on all life to find a balance, a homeostasis between what is outside and what's inside. So the degree to which we don't keep this law of life, that is, become like it, our world and all aspects of it suffer. Not just the man, but his surroundings, his world, his country, his family, all of reality. One of the ways of attracting the upper light that will allow us to raise to a level where we can begin to understand and sense the Creator is by the study of Kabbalistic texts. The only reason to study a Kabbalistic text is to attract the light that reforms, not for any intellectual knowledge, but for a transformation that happens within. As we begin to read this text, bring your question, the thing that you most need to know. Remember it and bring it into the reading. It doesn't matter what you understand intellectually. It only matters what you need and what you feel. This article is called There's None Else Beside Him, and it was spoken by Bala Salam, and it was recorded by his son, Rabash. It is written that there is none else beside him, meaning that there's no other power in the world with the ability to do anything against him, and what man sees, namely that there are things in the world which deny the household of above, is because he wills it so. In other words, It is purposely built that we see a system that we feel that there are good and bad events. And we feel that there is an opposing force to our good, that there's something that prevents us from feeling good. And the reason that this occurs is because the upper force itself wants this to happen. There's a purpose. It wills it so because there is no other force that can actually make this occur. And it is deemed a correction called the left rejects and the right adducts, meaning that that which the left rejects is considered correction. This means that there are things in the world which from the beginning aim to divert a person from the right way, and they reject him from holiness. He's saying here that this experience of not being able to sense the Creator directly, of this feeling of this force pushing us away, this is called the correction. This is a force by which something occurs that allows us to transform. It's part of this system of guidance. And it's called that the left rejects, that is, pushes away, and the right adducts, draws closer to the Creator. We're speaking here about a person who wishes to feel the Creator, not just the normal events of life, even though they're structured the same way because all of the levels of nature work by exactly the same principle. But this means that there are things in the world which from the beginning aim to divert a person from the right way, and they reject him from holiness. That means when a person desires to feel a sensation of the Creator, to know the laws that govern their life, to taste holiness, which is kedusha, which means to be separated, to be apart. That quality of kedusha is the quality of the will to bestow. It is completely separated from this world. It is completely above it. So there are things that are purposely in the system that cause a person not to be able to sense this holiness. And the benefit from these rejections is that through them a person receives a need and a complete desire for God to help him. This pushing away, once there is a desire, once there is an intention to know the Creator, this pushing away does what we have seen in the whole system of nature. It causes a need. It means that there's a specific need that is being built, not a need for this or that thing, for cars, for wealth, for food, for sex, for knowledge, for power. No, it's building a particular need. The benefit from these rejections is that through them a person receives a need and a complete desire for God to help him. The desire that's being built is the desire directly for God, directly to God. Yasher Kel, the desire directly for what is above. Since he sees that otherwise he's lost. In other words, they need a connection with the higher force that guides everything. Not only does he not progress in his work, but he sees that he regresses. That is, the more one needs this, the more the light exposes the difference between his inner condition and the state of the light. This is called the revelation of evil. What do we need this for? We need this because this is our means of measurement. It's by the contrast that we know something. We measure the scope of love, the completeness of the thought of creation, against the barrier in which we begin to sense our own nature. So not only is the nature of the Creator and the upper world revealed to us through this process of contrast, our own nature is revealed. And the greater the desire to receive grows, specifically with this desire to receive contact with the Creator, the greater the amount of the sensation of the Creator can fill it. Not only does he not progress in his work, but he sees that he regresses. In other words, he sees the difference between him and the Creator, and he lacks the strength to observe Torah and mitzvot, even not for her name. That is, a person feels that not only can they not sense the Creator directly, but they can't even fool themselves that they're doing it for any reason in order to reach the Creator. They feel the greatest degree of difference, but this is a blessing because it's by the expansion of the will to receive and its correction that we actually progress. That only genuinely overcoming all of the obstacles above reason, he can observe Torah and mitzvot. That is, not by his strength, not by his knowledge, not by any kind of ideas or theories, but only by the tangible reception of the light, which has got to be above his reason. This connection is above the will to receive and all the thoughts connected in how to get those things that we want. This force that we experience as good and bad events are the left and the right hand of the Creator that guide us by means of ups and downs through the normal events of our lives, if properly understood. Once we have this desire to go directly to God, no matter what it is that occurs in our life, with this desire, then this one particular need grows until it can eventually encompass and swallow the entire imaginary world and bring us into a complete contact with reality. This is just a taste of the beauty of these articles. We will continue our discovery of what exists within these articles and within Kabbalah. Join us again